Good morning, everyone. Let's do some prayers. Om Guru Brahma, Guru Vishnu, Guru Devo Maheshwara, Guru Sakshat Parbrahma, Tasmai Shri Guruve Namah. Om Bhurbhavasvaha Tatsavitravarenyam Bhargo Devasya Dhimahi Dhiyo Yo Nah Prachodayat Asto Ma Sadgamya Tamso Ma Jyotirgamya Mrityorma Amritam Gamya Om Sehna Bhavatu Sehna Bhunaktu Saviryam Karvavahi Tejasvinavadhitam Astu Ma Vidvishavahi Om Shanti 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 Om. Today is Thursday, so Brihadaranyaka Upanishad. We finished the first chapter, then we went through the summary of that chapter also. So today we are going to start the chapter 2. And section 1 of chapter 2 is called Ajaat Shatru Brahman. So this section is named after King Ajaat Shatru. And I was telling you last time, Ajaat Shatru means a person who doesn't have any enemy. Enemy is not born. Ajaat Shatru. So that's why it's called Ajaat Shatru Brahman. In this section, we will see the instructions on meditation on both the lower forms of the reality as well as the higher form of reality. In fact, this whole Upanishad is about the meditations. It's not to confuse us, different meditations, but we can choose the one which really works for us and understand the others also. So this section gives us the method of contemplation on Saguna, which is also called qualified or conditioned Brahma, or Nirguna, which is called unqualified, and the unconditioned Brahma. So these are like a technical terminology we should not get confused over. We really learn the very essence of all the spiritual contemplation in this section. The contemplation on the sun, moon, lightning, ether, air, fire, water, even the reflection in the mirror. The sound that is heard while walking alone. The directions, which are called quarters. Our own shadow. And even the selfhood. All these are dealt here. And their results are also enumerated. And it is said that all the results are transient when the meditation is on the conditioned and limited object. It could be the greatest object, starting from the sun and ending with the selfhood in its individual and universal aspect. So that's why this Upanishad is giving us 12 objects for meditation, which I just enumerated. It is pointed out that in each case, the meditation should not be limited to the object, but should be on that principle which is behind the object, which really gives the object its very existence, which remains unseen when the object is present and continues to exist unseen even when the object ceases to exist. I'm sure you can understand that. Atma is not seen, body is seen. So in that sense, what is body? Body is the object. Even when body vanishes, Atma still exists. So put it in the metaphysical language, contemplation should be on the asati, bhati, and priya. These are the technical terms used in this Upanishad. Asti means existence, bhati means consciousness, and priya means bliss. So existence, consciousness, and bliss aspects of the object. Not just the name and the roop, the name and the form. Let's look at how this story goes. Even the subject matter relating to the realm of ignorance has been explained here in this section. And there's a beautiful attempt made to differentiate between the knowledge and ignorance. What is ignorance? This Rishi is saying that to hold that the Supreme Self is relative and it's bound by the factors of time, space, and causation, that it is born as individual beings and it experiences the pain and pleasure. All this is in the realm of ignorance, he says. And what is the knowledge? Knowledge is the realization of the unity underlying all this divinity, or the diversity, or the multiplicity of the world. And with the help of the knowledge, we attain tranquil union with the soul, the transcendental principle, which is the essence of everything. That is knowledge. That is Gyan. And this principle, which is the essence of the entire existence, the term is used for that is Brahma, with reference to this world. Brahm. And Atma with reference to the individual. And that is the subject matter of knowledge. The story in this particular section is a conversation between Garge, he is also called Balaki, and Ajaat Shatru. Garge is the son of Balak. Balak was a very learned Brahmin, and he belonged to the Garg family. Very eloquent in speech. So this Balaki or Garge, because sometimes over here we see the name Garge used, sometimes Balaki. So don't get confused. But he goes to Ajaat Shatru. And who is Ajaat Shatru? He is the king of Kashi. He wants to teach him about Brahma. He approaches the king and he says, I am giving you 12 definitions all of which relate to the conditioned Brahma. And we'll see that King Ajaat Shatru does not agree to his imperfect conception and presentation of the reality. And he gives his conclusive view at the end. And both of them proceed with a progressive definition and determination of the nature of reality. There is a discussion between them about the waking, dreamy, and deep sleep states also. And at the end, we'll see that conversation ends with a final truth declared by the king, Ajaat Shatru, that Brahm is his self and the self of all. So this particular section is in the form of a conversation which becomes highly illuminating and interesting. And it really presents this subject in a manner which is easily comprehensible. Because in the last chapter, we saw some of the things which were beyond our comprehension, but this chapter is a little easier chapter because it's in the dialogue form. And this dialogue appears in other Upanishads also. So this is a pretty famous dialogue. Okay, so King Ajaat Shatru and Garge or Balke. So let's look at the very first verse. Dripat Balki Anuchanaha Garge Asahasah Agyat Shatrum Kashyap Uvach Te Brahmani iti ha Ajat Shatru Uvach Etasyam Vachihi Sahasram Dadmaha Jana Jankaha iti Dhavanti ve iti. There was once an eloquent descendant of Garg named Proud Balake, which I already mentioned it to you. He said to Ajaat Shatru, the king of Kashi, let me tell you about Brahma. At this, Ajaat Shatru said, for this proposal, I offer you 1,000 cows. People verily run to Janak, saying, Janak is benevolent, Janak is a listener, I too am like him. We are all familiar with King Janak, the father of Sita Mata. He was a Karam yogi. He always encouraged the rishis and the munis to come to his kingdom to have dialogues. Okay. So over here, he says, I will encourage you too. Cows were considered a great wealth back then. So he says, I will give you 1,000 cows. So that's how this story goes. That once upon a time, there was an eloquent speaker who was very proud of his learning. And he really came from the Garge family. He was known as a Balaki after his father's name, Balak. And he went to the king of Kashi, offered to teach him about Brahma. He said, for such a mere promise, whether or not you be able to explain Brahma, I offer you 1,000 cows. It's just like a putting the value, higher value on the learning. Because ashrams, temples, they were always supported by the rich people because they saw the value to these learnings. So that's why he says that sure, Janak is generous. I am also a king and I'm fond of hearing about the Supreme Brahma. I will liberally offer you 1,000 cows for your mere proposal to teach me about that supreme truth. And I also agree to listen to your explanation. Okay, so that's how the story starts. Let's look at the next verse. Sa ha uvach garge ya ev Aditye asau purushaha etam ev aham brahma upasehe iti sah ajat shatru uvach etasmin ma sarvdishtaha etam ve aham pratishtha sarvesham bhutanam murdha iti rajaha upase iti ya evam upasate atishtaha sarvesham bhutanam murdha raja bhavati. So Garge said, I adore as Brahm that being who is in the sun. Ajat Shatru replied, please do not talk about him. I adore him alone as transcendent, as the head of all beings, and as radiant. He who adores him thus becomes transcendent, the head of all beings, and radiant. So this is verse number 2. So sure, Garge was very proud of his learning, eloquent also. And that's why he is holding this view. He says that being who is in the sun, in the eye, and in the heart, in the form of the ego, that's what he means actually by this. The experiencer and the agent is Brahma. And he says, O king, you should meditate upon that being as Brahma. And Ajaat Shatru, he stopped him right there in the beginning. He said, you should not talk of that person who is in the sun. Why? Because it is a definition of a conditioned Brahma. The experiencer and the agent in this body. And Ajat Shatru knew it very well. So Garge must have some kind of a doubt that Ajat Shatru only knew that Brahma explained like this, but did not know the particular attributes and the results of meditation on them. So you can look at the sun, think there's a God, but what transpires from there? So that's why, in order to remove this doubt, the king narrated the attributes of the Brahma he meditated upon. And he said, I hold that Brahma as preeminent, all surpassing, as the head holding sway over all beings, and as resplendent. Because the king also meditated upon the sun. So to Garge, the sun was a conditioned form of Brahma. But he forgot that Ajat Shatru, the king, experienced the unconditioned reality behind the conditioned form of the sun. which is the Brahm by its essence. Because king meditated on that Brahm. So that's why king said that he who meditates upon him becomes preeminent, the head of all beings, and is endowed with that essence. The Shruti says that one becomes exactly as one meditates upon him. Whoever meditates upon him as a preeminent becomes preeminent. As head of all beings, becomes the head of all beings. So the definition about the person in the sun as Brahma presented by Garge was not completely accepted by Ajaat Shatru. This is what we read here. Because it's partial and does not encompass the whole which Brahma is. So now in the next 10 verses, Garge gives 11 other definitions about Brahma. So this is verse number 3. Sa ha uvac Garge ya avas ev asau chandre purush etam ev aham brahm upas iti sa ha vac ajat shatru ma मैतम इसमिन् वदिष्टः ब्राह्मण पांडुर्वासः सोमो राजेतिः वा अहम उत्तम उपास इति स य एतम एव उपासते हर हर सुतः प्रसूतो भवति न अस्य अन्नम क्षीयते. So Garge said, I adore as Brahm that being who's in the moon. At this Ajaat Shatru said, please do not talk about him. I adore him alone as the great, white-robed, radiant Som. Som is another name for moon. He who adores him gets Som pressed out, and that profusely in his sacrifices every day. And his food is never exhausted. So having had a setback in the discussion about Brahma, Garge said that he had practiced upasana on that being who is in the moon and also in the individual mind as the doer and the experiencer as Brahma. And Ajaat Shatru over here also contradicted this view of Garge on the simple ground that it was an imperfect conception of the supreme being. Because the statement meant that Brahm is the experiencer of the results of action and the agent of all karmas in the body and elsewhere. So the Brahm conceived by the Garge was conditioned and not the absolute. That's why the king Ajaat Shatru is arguing with him. And also Ajaat Shatru, see, Garge, he was learned. But Ajaat Shatru, he was the experiencer. He himself was well aware of this kind of definition about the conditioned Brahma. He also knew all about the attributes which can help a person meditate upon that Brahma. These attributes are just arrows towards the Brahma. Attributes are not the Brahma. This is the distinction he's trying to make. So attributes can help a person meditate upon that Brahm. And when we meditate deeply, we can acquire the corresponding results. So instead of the moon and the person in the moon identified with the mind, the king was meditating on the cosmic essence behind the mind and the moon. What are his attributes? And what are the corresponding results arising from meditation? We have learned that from other scriptures, from the previous chapter also. He is great in size. He is everywhere. Greatest among all the manifested beings. He is the first universal being from where all these innumerable worlds have come out. He is described as dressed in white garment. White garment means symbolizing, it's a symbol of purity. So the moon, which is identified with the vital force, has got a watery body. And water is also a symbol for purity. That's why it's called Som. He is radiant, as the moon is. So these are the attributes of the person who's in the moon. And the results by meditating upon them are production and a reproduction of Som. Moon indeed is food, has been said in the previous chapter. You can go back in the 4th section of the 1st chapter, the 6th verse. The moon is considered to be the deity producing food and the soul of all food. His food becomes inexhaustible. Who meditates upon that? So after sun and the moon, these examples given by Garge, now let's see what else he says in the verse number 4. Because he says, I'm going to give you 11 different examples. Sa huvach garge ya ev aso vidyoti. So this is what he's talking about now, vidyoti. Purush etam ev aham brahmopas iti sa huvach ajat shatru ma metan sminam vidishtaha तेजस्वितिः वा अहम अमृतपास इति स य एतम एव उपासते तेजस्वीः भवति तेजस्वनी हास्य प्रजा भवति. So Garge said, I adore as Brahm that being who is enlightening. Vidyut means lightning. So first sun, then the moon, now lightning. Ajaat Shatru said, please do not talk about him. I adore him alone as brilliant. He who adores him becomes brilliant indeed, and his progeny also becomes brilliant. So once again, there is a conversation, or it's almost like a interruption by Ajaat Shatru, because that learned Garge shifts his definition to the person in the lightning and declares him to be the Brahm of his meditation, lightning. So Ajaat Shatru stops him and reveals his superior knowledge of all attributes of the person in the lightning and the results which come after meditating upon him. So this meditation of Garge, that God is, or Brahm is a lightning, is not only defective, it's limited. Lightning is only one form of luminosity drawn from the great reservoir of Brahma, the supreme light of our lights. Lightning is just one form. Lightning is sometimes compared to the flash of illumination of Brahma knowledge. That word is used because it destroys darkness. When the lightning is there, darkness goes away. And the darkness of not just the physical darkness, but the darkness of ignorance. So lightning is used. So that person who's in lightning as well as in the skin and heart is to be meditated upon, brilliant one. He says that is just one of the attributes. That does not explain Brahma in totality. Whosoever meditates upon this attribute of power and brilliance becomes identified with it. And his progeny, he says, and attains the same result, power and brilliance. So he says, it's okay to meditate upon that, but to think that that is it, that is all, that is a fallacy. So that means that essence of sun is Brahma, but that is not all. Essence of moon is Brahma, but that is not all. Essence of lightning is Brahma, but that's not all. This is the point Ajaat Shatru is trying to make over here. Now let's look at verse number 5. What else he says? Sa huvac garge ya ev ayam akashe purush etam aham brahm upas iti sa huvac Ajaat Shatru ma met swin vadishtaha purnam प्रवृत्ति व अहम एतम उपास इति स य एतम उपासते पूर्यते प्रज्ञा पशुभिः न अस्यः लोकः प्रजोः उद्रतेः. Garge said, I adore as Brahm that being who is in the ether. Akash is the ether, the space. Ajaat Shatru said, please do not talk about him. I adore him alone as full and immobile. He who adores him thus becomes filled with progeny and cattle, and his progeny never dies out from this world. So now the learned Brahman proclaims the person in the ether is Brahma. By the person in the ether, he means Brahm identified with the element ether. You remember the 5 elements? Ether is the subtlest of that, the subtlest among the 5 elements. And the ether within the heart of an individual. That is the space outside and the space within a person, and also similar instructions are given in the Chandogya Upanishad also about the ether. But this definition of Brahm was already known to the wise king, who also knew its 2 attributes, because that's mentioned in this verse, fullness and immovability. And the results that accrue from the meditation, abundance of cattle, progeny, their continuity without a break. Because in this world, when we live, we need all this. So he says, a person meditates on it, automatically gets all this. Both the ether in the atmosphere and in the heart are limited, being the manifestation of the Supreme, which is also referred to as ether in the scriptures also. Because ether we can conceptualize. God or the Brahma we cannot. So ether is the subtlest. So the meditation should be on the Supreme, he says. Supreme. Now let's look at another example Garge is giving in verse number 6. Sa hovach Garge ya ev ayam vayo purush etam ev aham brahm upas iti sa hovach ajat shatru ma metam swa दिष्टः इंद्रोः वैकुंठः अपराजितः सेनेति वा अहम एतम उपास इति स य एतम उपासते जिष्णुः परा जिष्णुः भर्वयन्त्यः तस्याजाहि. Garge said, I adore as Brahm that being who's in the air. You can see from the subtlest is going down to the little grosser. I adore as Brahm that being who's in the air. Ajaat Shatru said, please do not talk about him. I adore him alone as a sovereign, as indomitable, and as the undefeated army. He who adores him thus becomes victorious and unconquerable, as also the subduer of his enemies. So the being in the air or wind, who is what? Who's that? Pran. That is a vital force in the individual body and the heart. And this Brahman is giving the instructions for meditation on Pran. But Ajaat Shatru, as the experiencer, knew him as having such attributes of sovereignty, irresistibility, and invincibility. That is called the air god. We are familiar with the 49 Maruts. Maruts are the air gods. That's almost like a very invincible army. So these Maruts, this term we have learned in Bhagavad Gita also, and in the Purans also. There are 49 of them. He also knew the results of meditating upon these attributes as the attainment by the meditator of sovereignty, irresistibility over the other enemies. So the king's instruction is to meditate on the universal Pran, the cosmic energy, not on its limited manifestation in the body and in the heart. So this conversation is happening because, first of all, this Garge, Balake, he just approached the king with a little arrogance that I can teach. Okay? Who can teach about Brahma? Teaching is always with the help of the words. Words are limited. This is something we need to experience. And this king Ajaat Shatru already experienced it. So that's why whatever definition Garge is giving, King Ajaat Shatru is saying it's not enough. It's not complete. If you're telling me God is in the sun only, that's not true. So that's why this conversation is going like this. So it's just like somebody who has a theoretical knowledge versus the experiential knowledge. So King was Anubhavi, and Garge was, sure, he was a learned, he was very eloquent speaker, but that's about it. So that's why you see this dialogue between these two. And we'll finish this dialogue next week. And I hope you go through these verses by yourself also a little bit and see what do you get out of it. Okay. So, but this is the story, and this chapter is little easier than the last one. But still you have to contemplate upon it. What is our experience when we meditate? Can we get out of that limited definition, experience in its expansiveness? Can we really experience it? That's where this Rishi is taking us with these interesting stories. Okay, we should not get lost in the story, but we should look at the essence, what is behind the story. Okay. Om Purnamada Purnamidam Purnat Purnamudachyate Purnasya Purnamadaye Purnameva Viseshyate Om Shanti 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 Om. Thank you very much.